Okay, after many failed attempts, things not working properly, not printing properly with the 0.2 nozzle, I think I might have finally got somewhere. So, before I continue, I have to say a massive thank you to Bamboo Labs. The two 0.2 nozzles that I had, it failed every single time I tried to use them. I spoke to the support team. They sent me out a new one. And so far, I've had 4 successful prints from it, using base settings, even tweaking a few things here and there, even printing a smaller version of the ironing sheets that I've got, and all printed. So there was definitely an issue with those nozzles, but this new one seems to have worked, which is good. So I actually have some, I'll put in brackets, successful prints. So I'm going to show you these just now. So the first one that I printed as a test was this one. And hopefully you can see that okay. And I'll show you the top in a second, but as you can see there, I'll just put my hand up here so you can see the, so it goes into focus. It actually printed out really smoothly. It's really good. However, the top looks like that. So hopefully you can see there that the ironing didn't work particularly well. So that isn't ideal. And also a caveat, I tried to print this using the trees for the support. It didn't work. You have to use the normal ones for these, and it's actually fairly easy. They just pull out. It's fairly easy to take out. But yeah, you can see there that the top just didn't print quite as well as I'd hoped. That's when I printed out one of these test boards using the 0.2 nozzle, and there was a few there that were candidates for being smooth. So I used those settings, or I tried one of those settings, and I then, make sure I pick the right one here, I then printed out another one. Again, pretty smooth on all the sides, but again at the top, it was getting closer. So if I actually show you the difference between those two. So the bottom one there is the first one, that is the second, the top one's the second one. You can see the top one there, hopefully, is a lot smoother. However, it's still not 100% smooth, especially in the circle area is not smooth, and then there's a couple of bits. It seems to really struggle when it gets near the text there in the little logo. So that's what I got with that. And then I printed out a third one, changing the settings again, and we got even closer. So it's pretty smooth. Again, round the text, it's slightly, so I'm trying to get that into focus, it's slightly, doesn't work quite as well. And again, on top of the outdented, what we call it, circle, it's quite rough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try one more, tweaking the settings slightly again. And like here's all 3 of them. So again, worse at the bottom, or the worst one is at the bottom, and the better one is at the top. Hopefully you can see there, see the differences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try one more. I'm going to change the settings again, but if I don't get it very smooth or in an almost finished state, then I'm going to have to reside to the fact that this is going to have to be sanded and painted. So it looks like that might need to be the inevitable option. It won't take a lot of sanding, it won't take a lot of Bondo, and it won't take a lot of paint. So it's only really the outside parts that I need. The bit all in the inside I can just print out on a standard nozzle. Don't need to worry about anything like that. Maybe the metal parts here, I'll see how they turn out. The ones that are silver, I have silver filament, and hopefully I won't need to paint that, but we'll see. If I'm painting the whole lot, then I might just need to paint those parts. But I'm going to see if I can get this smoother. And if not, as I say, we're going to just have to paint these and sand them. So let's see what one more test produces. Fingers crossed. Okay, so before I print out the rest of it, there's a few things I need to amend. One being the bottom part. This is one of the test ones that I did. Because obviously this needs to be a little bit longer, a little bit bigger. But the bottom part here is where the cover goes onto it. And I need to amend the cover as well as possibly the inside of this. The reason being is this little charging point, which will go into the battery, USB-C, has to sit down here. I want that to be present always at the bottom. It's not going to be covered up. It's going to be literally just sitting flush with the cover. So this needs to be glued or affixed to the cover somehow. So that way all I need to do is plug it in and charge it up without having to take anything off and stuff like that. But also it needs something to hold in the backing, because I don't want this to be glued to the cover and then when I'm plugging it in for it to maybe come off. So there might need to be some sort of backing on this just for this to sit against, or have a little, actually now that I think about it, I'm looking at this a little bit closely, I might be able to have a little ledge and have this, so if you imagine this is a ledge on the inside, have that sitting on top of the ledge, so it's like that, so you can maybe see there, so it's like this, and then the cover going over the top. So technically it wouldn't be glued to the cover, it would be glued from the bottom onto the actual inside on a little ledge like that. That is probably going to be the easiest and best way of doing it. I just need to measure so I can make this flush with the cover. This is set back a little bit on the inside and then glued onto that. That will be glued onto that once I wire it up, because the wires are going to go through, come all the way through to the top for the other things, but the battery obviously is going to sit in here. So this still needs to be deep enough for the battery, but I have a little ledge where I can just glue that on top and glue it inside and then have it so it's centered. Also need to have it centered onto the cover. So I'm going to take this into bamboo, possibly Tinkercad, because it's just a basic shape. There's no text on it, so I should be able to take this into Tinkercad. Because I tend to find when you put certain complex things into Tinkercad, it simplifies it a lot more, and then the quality of the output isn't that great. I should really learn other 3D software and stuff like that, to be honest, so that's something I'll maybe look at in the future. But I'll try and Tinkercad first, see if I can do this, see how it looks, and if I can do that, then that will solve that issue. So that's what I'm going to work on next before I print these out. This part here, I want to add in a little block, and I'll be gluing just the top part of the little USB charger, because the wires are going on the other side, and that's obviously when it's going to get soldered. So I measured it, and it just needs to be about 5 milliliters. So I'm just going to grab a block, I'll add one of them to the page, and I'm going to make this 5 mil and 5 mil. And the height, we want it to be centered in the middle. Now, what I'll need to do, I'm going to make it 5 mil just now, so it's a little 5 mil block. Now, I want the USB to be centered in the middle, so that when the cover goes over it, it will have that bit in it. Now, I need to measure what the cover will be, and I've got one of the printed parts from the top, which will be the same as the bottom, and the internal, if I use the other side of this, the internal is 15.3. So make sure I've got this correct again. $15.2. We'll say it's 15.2. Seems to change. Should try and make sure it's completely centered. We'll say 15.2. So it's 15.2 on the inside. So that's going to be 15.2. Half of that up. So I want to make sure all the sides are actually the same height and width. So that is 15.2. That one is saying 15.5. So the height. So if that's the top here. So I want to make it centered top and bottom of that first. I keep getting different sizes, which isn't great. Right, 15.5. So get 15.5 that way. So that's up and down. And across the way, we have 15.2. It's a little bit, 15.3. It's a little bit narrower. So I want to take half of that. So if I put that little block into here, we'll just move up slightly. So it's sitting there. I'm just going to make sure, if I select all, align. I want to align it centered. That's fine. Just going to move this around a little bit so I can see it face on. So that's sitting there, but again, I want the USB part of it to be sitting pretty much dead center. So if I say it's 15.5, well, that should be centered there, which is fine, because that is centered to the width. It's more the height that I need to worry about. So this is 3 millimeters. The little USB-C is 3 millimeters high. So I'm just going to bring up a calculator, make sure I get this right. So if the whole thing is 15.5, I want to take away the 3 millimeters and then divide that by 2. Means it's 6.25. I hope I've measured that correctly. So I want the height to be 6.25. And I want this to make sure that this is actually sitting where it should be sitting. Let's move it up a little bit so I can see this little thing here. I want to make sure that that is butting against it, right? So it is. So that there should be centered width and height once I glue this on. And then you've got the cover as well. So the cover then also needs to have that on it as well. And that'll be 6.25 high with a little 3 millimeter hole for this to sit in. He says, not being convinced. But we'll see. So that should be correct. So I'll just measure that again. It's 6.25. So I need that for the cover. So what I'm going to do is take that and that and just group them together. That is now... In fact, no, I don't need to do that, because first I also need to do is to measure the gap between where this should be and the edge. So this is going to be harder to do. I'm actually, I don't have a ruler here. Got one somewhere, but I can't. Oh, there it is. So basically what I'm trying to do is on this is just try to measure the width, the depth of that, which is literally 1.5 milliliters. 1.5 millimeters. Coming up for 2. We'll say 1.5 deep. So, if we say 1.5 deep, if I take that, let me just move it around. Basically, I want this to be facing forward. And you really need to learn 3D software properly. That needs to be at the edge, which we can make it centered in a minute. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It has to be... Getting it to the edge, however, is another matter. In fact, I know how to do that. I'm being daft. So I want to do that and that first. Let's move that back a little bit. Just move it to an angle so we can see. So I want to take that and that, align, and I want it to align to this edge. So that's now aligned to that edge. However, obviously it's overlapping. Now I want to take this and move up. I need to make sure that this is sitting flush. It is hanging over, so it's not quite right. It's because the inside is treating something else sticking out. In fact, that there is also the cover. So it has to sit behind that so that the cover can sit in, because it butts up against that. So there's a width of the cover as well. So actually I'm going to have to sit, it might be inset a little bit. So I am going to have to sit that at the edge of the cover. So maybe if I sit it there, I'm going to have to print one out and see how it works. I'm just going to have to print one out. So I take that, align, centered. Let's just make sure that that's actually just butting against it. It is 6.25. It's 2 millimeters off the ground. Okay. That should be okay. And because, like I say, those nodules here, that's where it sits against, so it's flush, so the outside of it's flush. So let's just see how that goes. Group. So I've got that part of it done. I'm just going to go back to Tinkercad, main window. I'm going to create a new one. And I am going to import my little plate cover, or whatever it's called. That's not that. End cap, is it the end cap? Yes, it's that. See, these are good. That's where the holes sit, so it has to sit in those holes. So you can see here, a little end cap on it. Now, is that the same? That's an end stop. Well, that's just that part, right? That's for the other inside. So the end cap, I think, is the part that we need. It's the same end cap, top and bottom. So if I import, choose file, let's go back into my props, Emanator, STL, end cap, so there's the end cap. I'm just going to have this flat on the ground so we know. So that's it there. That's now sitting on the ground. Let's go to top view. In fact, let's twist it around, go to home, top view. So that's the little end cap. And basically, that's the bottom. Actually, maybe what I want to do is have it so it's in line with that. We can have that on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is rotate this that way. And we know, let me just bring in a block. We know that this is 3 millimeters high with a width of 8.6. Maybe make it 8.7, so there's a little bit of, 8.7. So let's just look at this again. If I want that, in fact, we'll do this part first. We want that to be 8.7. But that's at the finished size. That's at the finished size. I need to blow this up 9 point whatever it is %. So, okay, so I had to ask ChatGPT because I wanted to make sure I got this right. So I basically said, oh, the thing's been blown up in Bamboo Studio by 110.53% to get to the finished size. So if I have a hole that's 8.7 millimeters by 3 millimeters, what should the initial hole be at the smaller size before I blow it up? And it's now saying it should be 7.87 by 2.71. I love ChatGPT. So 7.87 by 2.71. So if I do this, so Let me just double check what that was again. 7.87. So the width is 7.87. And the height is to be 2.71, was it? 2.71. 2.71. That should be the width and height. Now, if I just go top view, let's just make them centered here and here, which is ultimately what I want. So that should be centered there. Let's make that a hole. Select all, group, which will cut the hole out. So there's a hole. So that should allow for this to slot, be open so you can charge it up, but sit far enough back that it's going to work. Now the height of this, if I can get the height, is 2 millimeters. So that is 2 millimeters. That's interesting. So if that is 2 millimeters, then I know that it needs to be set back. In fact, the width of that is probably going to be enough for that just to sit in. That's going to be enough, so I don't need to set back, because as long as I'm at the edge of the little nodules for that to sit in, the 2 millimeters of the cap will fit this. Let's print these out and see if I'm correct. So as you know, I've printed these out horizontally on the bed, and that was as close as I could get in terms of quality, which is actually pretty decent. However, the ironing you can see just on a little few lines near the text and things like that in the logo, and there's a couple of bits I'm not overly happy with. So that would take some sanding and prepping, and it wouldn't take a lot of sanding and Bondo and the various other things, so it would actually be fairly quick to put these together. But again, I'm trying to do this without me having to do any of that, and then I can go straight into electronics, etc. Now I know the final finish would still be better being painted, etc. But I just want to see how far I can take it. For me, this is more about the electronics and the small electronics and getting that to work. I then decided, okay, I'm going to try it again printing vertical. Previous attempts just didn't work out well enough. The quality wasn't great. Got a few here, but you've seen them. Yeah, the quality wasn't great. The text was terrible. Things like that. However, I printed out these. Hopefully you can see that okay. And that is bloody close. That is actually quite smooth. And I think I might get away with that. There's a few different options there. I'll pick a couple of the best ones. Even things like the little holes. The holes are pretty decent. The holes for the screws are worked out well. This is actually looking rather good. And I'll show you another one. There's a hole there. Try and get this in focus. See there the text. The text just came out really well. And I printed it out vertical that way with normal supports, not trees. And I actually think this may be the winner. So I don't think I'm going to have to prep in terms of painting and sanding and all the other stuff that comes with it. So I think I'm going to leave these as is. So I'm now just in the process of printing out the bottom part with those little parts, and then I'll print out the silver part in the 2.0 or 0.2 nozzle, the silver PLA, see how that looks, and if all going well, those look great, then the rest of it will just get printed out in the 0.4 nozzle. Don't care about the rest of it inside, because all that you're not going to see. But I'm printing at the tops, the bottoms, the silver part and the bottom part. So those are printing just now, so we'll check them out, but that, I think, is pretty good to go. Yeah, it's not completely, where I would like it. No, it probably could do with still a little bit of a sand, a little bit of a thing. But from what I'm trying to do, as I say, this is just me really experimenting with the small electronics, more so than the finish. But I think even that just looks good, and it would work well as a film prop because you wouldn't see any, in fact, like even with the naked eye, I can't really see any layer lines or anything like that. It's actually looking darn good. I think that might be even one of the better ones. Not seeing anything on that as well, as you can see. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. I think I finally got somewhere. 0.2 nozzle, printing vertical, no adaptive layers, no nothing like that, just printing it out as is. I'm also printing it that way, as I say, with a hole at the bottom, and then you get there's almost like the support goes all the way up to where the holes are here and stuff like that. Easy to take away, easy to come apart, more so than the trees from the previous versions. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. So now it's the rest of it. Let's see how we got on. But nope, happy with that. Okay, so for me, it's been a couple of weeks before I've recorded anything. I've been doing a little bit of travelling for my consultancy work that I do and my marketing side of things. But that's now done. I can get back into this joy emanator and get this finished, and hopefully by the end of this video, we'll have a complete joy emanator. No, you won't. I have been doing a lot of testing when I get back by printing a lot of stuff out, which we'll show you in a second. And I'm quite happy where that's got to. And then it's going to be looking at the electronics. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm doing this project, is to work with those sort of small electronics within a small footprint to see how well I can do that, if I can do that, and try to make that work within the constraints of the thinness, etc., of the joy emanator. So let's just get stuck in, let's do this, and hopefully by the end of this, as I say, we'll have a fully working joy emanator.
It's false. No way. Not this time. Not this time. No, not this time. It's totally made up.
That's the plan anyway. Okay, so I have all the bits printed out now. These were the tests that I did for the top part. You can see there the joy emanator text is actually quite sharp. The finish is actually looking good, to be honest. Yes, I could maybe get a better finish by painting it and sanding it a bit more, or I haven't sanded this at all. So if I was to sand it and paint it, I know I could probably get more of a complete finish, but I'm trying to do this build without doing any of that. So that I'm actually fairly happy with. I think that's sharp. There's no real layer lines as such on it. And it's all looking good. You know, the holes for the screws and everything else. It's all looking pretty decent. And I'm really happy with that. And that's the bottom part, which will be like this. And also, as you saw, I added in a little platform there to add on the USB. That might need to just get sanded down just a little bit, or filed down just a little bit, just in case it's maybe a little bit too high. Because what that's going to do is that's going to slot in here. The USB will be there, so it's always visible at the bottom, and make it easier to charge. So I've got those two parts there. I have some of the silver parts, which actually printed really well. Again, I know I would get a better finish if I was painting them, etc. But these I'm actually really happy with, and that's using silver filament, just PLA. And these are looking pretty good. There is a little line here on all the parts that I've got for whatever reason. But that's going to be hidden because it's going inside anyway, so it's not too much of a bother for those. I have the covers at the top. I have little buttons. This goes over the light to make the ring. And I've got these silver parts here as well. And these are all looking good, as you can see there. I'm actually really happy with how these look. They're meant to obviously be silver metal. And these all up here, keep dropping things. These will then just get stuck into here. So you get the black lines with the metal in between. So it'll be something like that, across all the way through. And I'm really happy with how they look. Again, I don't see any layer lines, and it's looking pretty smooth. So, and that was printed on my new 0.2 nozzle, which Bamboo Labs were kind enough to send back out, because the other two that I had just didn't work at all, no matter what I did. Plugged that one in, worked straight away, and I've not had an issue since, so fingers crossed. And then my first test on printing transparent. Now, when I say transparent, it's more translucent than transparent, because as you can see here, which I'm going to just bring over, here's a little test that I ran. So that is basically what happens when you print something using the printer to print out PLA transparent. So you do still get layer lines on it. However, if I was to put this against it, you can see there, you can definitely read through it and do things like that. So you can definitely have a look through it as well. And I've got this little thing that I printed out as well. You can see here, completely see-through all the way up to harder to read. It's got a little gauge from 0.2 up to 2. So you can read through it. So you can maybe use that for little monitors or things like that. And when I do my next build, this wouldn't be suitable for what I'm doing because it needs to be completely clear. I'm probably actually for some of the panels going to use real glass, to be honest, when I do my next build, which more will come apparent on that soon. However, for the lights, these are the little lights that appear in here. So that will appear somewhere in there. The little black panel goes in the middle, so you just see the ring, and the light shines through that. So if I grab my phone and I bring up a torch, hopefully you can see there that light completely shines through and it is fine. So when the light comes on, it won't be an issue. And that doesn't need to be completely clear. Having that sort of frosted type look works well for what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to start constructing some of this. I won't be constructing the full thing because I need the electronics to fit inside. But what I'm going to do is start constructing some of this so I can then see what space I've got to play with for the electronics and then move over to the main event, which is the electronics. So let's get stuck in. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is construct the silver parts onto here, get the easy parts out of the way first. Now these have got holes on them because that's where a metal rod sits, which allows it to move up and down. However, my only concern is because I had to blow this up, is the metal rod and the screws actually going to do its job because it's going to be slightly different size. So, but I'm just going to start gluing it. I'm sure we'll be able to make it work somehow. So I'm just going to take these little panels and basically, like I mentioned before, those are getting glued on the inside of each of these, so it covers everything up. So that's what I'm going to do for the time being. So, and I've got my instructions here from MatterWiz, who put this whole 3D STL together, even though I've made some amendments. Need to get the glue off of that because it is solid at the top. Let's get my knife, make a wee hole. There we go, that's fine, that's coming out. Got our dabs. Take one of these. And I'm just going to put that in the middle. Slide down, hold in place. And that's that glued in. Let me do that to the next ones. Don't need a lot of glue, just a little bit, so it's not a big part. Put that here, slide it down, press. We're just starting to, you can see that coming together already. Now I'm only putting the 3 sides on just now because again that metal rod has to go on one of them before being overlaid with one of these. So that's how it looks from that side. So I'll just get the next one done. That's them now put in place. You can already see it coming together. I'm now going to glue on this little shroud cover, which basically just sits at the bottom. So you can see something like that. The silver. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue around 3 sides again. Slide that in. Give it a little press. There's a little overhang there, which I'm going to just try and take off. That's now in place, you can see. Keeping that open bit here, because again, that's where that metal arm is going to go. So that's one done. Let that dry. It should dry in seconds. Now we've now got, oops, I've got both of these. I'm all butterfingers today. So we've now got all these. So I've got these little arms. Let me just cut this open. at the bin. So I've got these little arms. What that does is it allows it to slide up and down. So that's what's going to make the mechanism work. And what that does is there's meant to be screws that go in, very, very small screws that go on this side, and then little bolts that go on the other side. So yep, screws go on this side, little bolts go in on the other side, and then that then slots in to here, apparently. This little rail. So we shall see if that is the case. So there'll be a couple of little screws. You can see here that this has got a couple of little screws either side, just taking them off. And now that obviously will come off straight away, which I don't want it to do because there's little ball bearings. I don't know if the ball bearings will actually, don't know if you can see that in there at all. But the ball bearings are in there. That may or may come out if I take it off completely, so I'm just going to be very careful with that. I'm going to look for some screws that I got, which are these little bolts. And these little screws. Tiny, tiny, tiny little screws. They'll get little flat heads on them. Which reminds me, I need to get my screwdrivers to make this easier for me, which I've got a little pack of screwdrivers here, which should be small enough for what I need it to do. Let's have a little look. So I had to get these all the way from China, because for whatever reason, I couldn't get them here. Just to show you how small this screw is, I'm actually going to get a pair of pliers. So yeah, this is going to be a bit of a pain. I may need to get my magnifying goggles on. Let's see if I can grab one of these. That's how small it is. That, believe it or not, is a little screw which fits into here. So I'm going to have to get my magnifying goggles to see what I'm doing, to then put screws into each one of these, so then the bolts can go on. So I grabbed my magnifying glasses. These things, well, this thing is just a godsend, especially for somebody who's 50, whose eyesight's failing. But these, even for like painting miniatures and stuff like that, is got a little light on it as well, which you can put on, which I don't know if it's charged. Nope, it needs charged, but I don't need that just now. All I need to do is see what the hell I'm doing, because this is really, really small. And there is a little head on it that I can see on that screw, but it's tiny. So I need to, it's a small screwdriver I have. I'm just going to move this up a little bit because you want to see what I'm doing, because I need to look closer down towards it. So I'm trying to look at that. I can see there is a little head there. And even this screwdriver is a tad too big. Let's see if I can get it in. So it looks like I need a really thin screwdriver, because that is not doing the job. Okay, I managed to take a bit of sandpaper and file down my screwdriver, which now fits this, because this is quite a soft metal, this thing. And I managed to get one on the underside, although rather than screwing it from the top all the way through, I screwed it from the bottom and then added on the little brass fitting that goes onto it. So I'm going to have to get pliers to take this one off, because the thread at the top broke for the screw, or the screwdriver. So I'm going to take this one off. I put these on just to make sure that this doesn't slide off, because apparently that will be pretty much gone and won't be able to use it. So what I'm going to do is get the other screws in to these ones, get the pliers to take this one out, fix the other ones in, and then we should be good to go. But we keep the top one off, so I'll leave this one on just now. But we don't put anything in the top one, because then that screws into another part as well. So let's just get some more screws in. And again, apologies if you don't see this, because this is going to be quite delicate and quite small, because these screws are absolutely tiny. So what I'm going to do is do one of these first, rather than doing both at the same time, and that will make sure that I'm actually doing it the right way without screwing up two, or would only screw up one. So again, I'm just going to move this up again, just so I can see what I'm doing, because I need to get in quite close. I need to find out first where the top of the screw is. That's the top part there. Apologies, you won't see much here. As I say, that's how small the screw is. And this little rail, the screw that's going to fit in here. I'm basically just doing this by hand because it seems to be the easiest way. Still not easy, but it's the easiest way. Is to get it in first by hand. Try and rotate it. Nope, keep dropping it. First one was a lot easier. Let's try again. Find the top of the screw, which is under my fingers. I'm going to put this here. Screw in, I think. Oh, I thought I had it there. This really is, if you're not into, as we would say in Scotland, footery or fiddly things, but we would say footery, then this is maybe not a project for you. Right, so I've got one in. I don't know if you can see that. I've got one in. I can take my little tiny screwdriver, which I've sanded down, and just start screwing that in till it goes as far as it can go, which is like that. And you want that bit to stand out, because then you take the little brass fittings, which again are quite small. So, I'm going to drop one there. I'll just put that one here. Again, these are minuscule as well, little brass fittings. Hence the reason why I'm wearing my goggles. You basically just put that over the top and screw it over. This one you can do by hand. And that's when you get something like that. And those parts fit into the holes of the 3D print. So I'm just going to get the rest of them done, and then we'll have one complete. Okay, I managed to get them on, although I did lose about 2 or 3 of the screws because they just pinged and went somewhere on the floor, which I'll need to try and find later. But I've got them on, all bar the last one. I've just got that screw in there so it doesn't slide off. However, I need to make sure it doesn't slide off at the top because, like as I say, these have got little small ball bearings in it. If that comes all the way off, ball bearings will come flying out and then you're pretty much screwed. So I've got this now in place. So that part's done. So looking at what needs to be done next is we need to then fit this to the core, which the core is one of these. So the inserts must be press fitted into the corresponding holes in the core. No glue should be necessary. However, because I printed this out larger, I will have to put glue onto it because the holes are going to be bigger than what this actually is. Because I can sit that in here and I can pretty much guarantee, if I get this right, and obviously the holes aren't in the same position because it is printed bigger, as you can see there. They're slightly out of position. Yeah, I never thought about that. I might need to drill new holes into this, so it's not a huge issue. So I'm going to have to drill new holes next to it all just to get this to fit in. So if that's to fit in like, and just double check the drawings. So this actually has it sitting so that it's over that part there, which is interesting. And then what should happen is this little part here, which I am going to put on. So there's this little cover. So this should fit over the top like so. And that will get screwed in to hold into place. Let's see if that is enough to slot in. Also, don't want to bend this metal arm as well. Still not enough. It's a little bit bigger. So I need to be a little bit bigger again. And that is the biggest drill bit I have. So what I'm going to have to do, I think, is to try and wiggle it to become a bit bigger. Let's see. Make sure this is clean, so there's nothing sticking. It's close. I think it's close. Just needs to be a tad wider. That one's going in. There we go. So that's it now in place. And that is not moving. And that should go down, get stuck there, go up. So that is not going to move, and that means I do not need to glue it. That's actually staying pretty well in place. Happy with that. So that's that part of the mechanism. On one of them, still need to do the other one. So I've got that part. I just want to make sure that I've got all the elements that I need. So the way this is working is it's constructing it and then gluing it, then doing the electronics to go on the inside. So this is being constructed first. So if the wires are meant to fit through there. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to construct it fully until I know the electronics are working. So the next stage would be for that to fit into the bottom part. This is a back end for the USB. That would then, let me make sure I get this in the right place. So that would then slot into here, and get glued, maybe that way, get glued. Here, so you see that from the front, you don't want to see that from the back, because the back is going to slot and get screwed. Those two little screws there get screwed at the back of this, and that is what goes there. So that needs to make sure that that goes all the way down. So it might be that this needs to go further down, possibly. So that's something I'm going to have to look at. So if that's like that, and those are those screws, if I put that down to there, is that going to... No, there's going to be a gap, which we don't want. We want it to go all the way down. So this actually needs to move down further, which might be an issue without me damaging this part, which means I might need to print out this whole part again. So that did need to be further down. Can I take this off? Yes, I can. It came off fairly easily. So I need to actually make that further down. It should actually have been down to about there. However, it's then not going to be long enough because this is longer. That is going to be an issue. That's really going to be an issue. So actually, there is a way to fix this. in that is to reprint the top part, but moving these holes further up so that they're in line with the holes here, now that it's in a new position. So it can be done without me having to redo that whole part, but that's meant to shut tight, like that, and then scroll up, like so. But to do that, which I may glue this down as well, just to give it a bit more security. This part, I'm going to reprint these so the holes are further up. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Okay, so while I'm printing out this again, to adjust the circles, or the little screw areas at the back, I'm going to work on the electronics. So first thing I want to do is connect the battery to the USB board. But because this is a smaller one, if you remember, is I can't just use a connector. So I'm going to have to cut the connector off and then solder the wires directly on top of this. So the red goes into bat plus and the black goes into bat minus. But before I solder, I want to get this glued on to this so it's in place. So it's something like so. In fact, I might not need to glue it in. I think, if I remember rightly, it just sort of slotted in and it would fit in place. And then all I really need to do is glue the board to the bottom of the actual panel within the smaller one, which on top of that, once I know if that fits, I have to sand it down or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that this is in the right place. So there's a little nodule on this. See a little nodule? I'm going to have that going down the way. So basically that will mean that that goes in like this. So this is facing up the way. I suppose it doesn't really matter too much where this goes because the USB-C will fit anyway. But just for aesthetics, I'm going to have it in. So I'm going to see if I can fit this in here without any glue. Because the last time it did just sort of slot in. And it is going in. I just need to force it slightly. There we go. So you can see like that is already in. That is in tight. And then once this is glued in, that should be fine. And once that's glued to the bottom, it should be fine. So that is not moving. So that's how I want that. I'm just going to make sure it's fully in. Which it is. And then all that will happen is once that's at the bottom of it, just get the USB, that will plug in, and all going well. And it fits in place. So now it's time to get the soldering iron out and see about soldering this. Now, one thing I've also bought, and we'll see if it actually does anything, is I bought this liquid because I know solders can come away from it quite easily if it's been pulled, but also to protect the electronics. This is a coating that you can put over electronics, almost like a gel, that will then protect this. So you put it over the top, obviously without putting over the USB side of it. Just put it over the top and across the electronics, and then that should hold things in place while protecting the electronics. That is the idea anyway. I've never used this stuff before, but basically clean the surface and adhere or coat object removing dust and oil stains. Apply the sealant evenly to the area that needs to be sealed and control the thickness and shape. Let the seal cure for 5 to 8 hours, although it takes 24 hours to complete its curing. So I want to do that to make sure that it's going to all stay in place. Well, that's the idea, so we'll see if that works. But yeah, let's get this soldered and we'll start to look at that. Okay, this is when I probably screw things up because I hate soldering. I'm now going to try and solder battery to the USB. I have the wires in the little holes already, I bought this little clamp thing, which is helping me massively. So we're going to give this a go. So this is absolutely minuscule, so I need to be careful what I'm doing here. So let's do the top one first and see what we can do. I tell you, I hate soldering. This doesn't seem to be melting. There we go. There's one. There's two. So I have the solder on. I'm also going to do that on the other side just to make sure that it is doubly in place. I'll give that a second to dry or to take hold. It should be pretty much now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently, sorry, I'm going to have to move the camera here. I'm going to gently rotate this round. I'm going to bend both of these this way. I'm just going to inspect. Let's move the camera back in. Oh, yep. There we go. I'm just going to inspect this side to see how it is. Just going to have a little look. I've got my magnifying glasses on. Yeah, I might just add a little tiny bit to the other side, just to be on the safe side. So, soldering iron again. Just a little bit here, not too much. Just enough to hold it in place. Need to move around the other side. There we go. Put that there. This one's a little bit trickier to get into. Making a mess of that. Let me cut that bit of wire off. And excuse my sniffing if you hear me, I've got a bit of a cold. Okay, let me try that again. Add that to the end. A little bit of this. Okay, that should hopefully do it. And I'm only going to do one of these just now. Make sure the whole thing works before I start putting in all the other stuff. All the other ones as well. So I'm just going to move my soldering iron out the way, off camera. So what will hopefully happen is that will now work. I'm just having a little look again. So that is now, yeah, it's now soldered on this side. And again, if I put that liquid over it, that should hold it in place as well. And it's been soldered on the other side. So fingers crossed that will work. What I might do is actually plug this in using the USB. Let me just move the camera again. Apologies. I'm going to move this round to here. Just bend this gently. So hopefully you can see. I can move under the camera again. I'm just going to bend this back so it gets into focus. So hopefully you can see there, that's soldered. The battery's there. I don't know if the battery does anything if I plug something in. So what I'm going to do is just take this USB wire. I'm just going to plug it in and see if anything works. So let me plug this on this side so I can reach. Got to be very carefully. Just plug that into here. And I did see a light or something coming on there. Maybe it's on the other side. So maybe it's on the other side. Hold on, I do see a light. So if I just move this camera, twist round, hopefully you will see a little red light here. So to me, that tells me that it is charging. That tells me that it is charging because it's got power to power the light. So that is a good sign. Now just to check, I plugged in the one that doesn't have a battery to it and it's just flashing blue. So that probably means, yeah, it's powered, but there's nothing charging it, whereas the other one was red, which in my opinion means it's charging. So fingers crossed. Okay, so as you just saw, I have soldered this part, and I have to do this in stages. So the next stage will be to take these wires. These are DuPont wires I've just stripped, and I'm going to have the wires going from the USB board into this little board here, this little bistable board, I think they call it. It's a switch. So that's going to go into there, but I do need to make sure that it's added into the device before I solder the last part, before I solder it to that board. So what I'm going to do is take these wires, solder it to this board, the USB board, then start to carefully put that into the device, glue this in place, or I won't glue it into place just in case something goes wrong. I'll put it into place and then pull the wires through, see how long I need to make these wires to then go into that board. And then from there, I'll be able to then solder the rest of it. And saying that though, I do need to solder the other parts which can't be in the device. This is going to take a little bit of thinking, because although I'm waiting on the new ones of these printed with the new holes at the back for the screws, so the bottom part here is where this goes, so that would slot into here. Once it's all in, other wires are coming out, going out through the top, and then that will then, because this extends, so the wires need to be long enough for when it extends. But then when that comes in, the board is going to be in here with the other elements. So I think what I now need to do is, yeah, what I think I need to do now is look at the top part with the lights and the switch, put wires onto that so that the wires go through, and then I can connect the bottom and the top part to the bistable board with the audio board as well, which I'm going to have in here to fit all that together. So I think I'm going to have to do this in 2 stages. I've done the bottom part. I'll then do, or I'm about to finish off the bottom part by adding on those wires. I'll then do the top part, put that through the top, and then in the middle where it meets, that's where I'll have to solder it to one of the boards, the bistable board or the switch board. I think that's how it's going to have to work. Intriguing. So as you can see there, I've now got the battery into the USB board with some extra wires coming out, which will then go into the little switch bistable board. So I'm going to leave that one for now, leave that to the side. What we're now going to focus on is this. So this is, if you can see, I'm just going to move this out of the way. Oop. So what I'm now going to focus on is this. So this is a little housing that goes in the inside. I would slot into side here. This goes to the top. I've already super glued the button, and there's going to be an overlay over this. And I need to solder things onto the arms of the button. And then I've got the light glued in as well. So that's glued in. And then there is, these that get soldered to the bistable board. But one of these is also, the longer arm, is also going to have a little transistor going to be soldered to it, and then I'm going to overlap it with a shrink wrap just to hold it into place, and that'll be that one done, and then this one goes into the bistable board, I believe. But let's do this first. I need to get this little transistor, which is a 330 transistor, a resistor, sorry, keep saying that, it's a 330 resistor, onto this longer arm here for the light part of it. So we'll do that next. Okay, I have solder on it. Might not be the prettiest, but it has been soldered. I'm going to let that just solidify, which it'll be already. So if I take this off and take that off, that should now be in place, which it is. And what I'm going to do is put a sheath, stick this in here, hopefully not breaking the thing. Get in. You can see there's a different one if this one's not working. There we go, it's going in now. And I can get a sheath around the whole thing. Okay, so I have put the shrink wrap around this one stupidly. I don't know why I never thought of this. When I was using the heat gun, it started to melt the plastic. Luckily not too much, but I do need to put something around this one and on these pins, which I was going to try and shrink wrap, but I don't think that's going to be possible. So I'm going to have to be very careful with how I put this. So I shouldn't have glued these on. I should have put all the wires on first and then attached it to this. So I'll do that with the second one. But let's see how far I can get with this one. So I've got the wire on here. That will probably end up getting chopped off eventually. So I need to get the second one on. However, because that is just basically a wire, I'm probably just going to take a wire, one of these DuPont, and I should just be able to slot that on up there. That's now on, and I've got that one now connected, which I will then connect and solder to the board. So I think a DuPont wire will be fine for this part here. So, it might come off, so I might try and put a little sheath around it, but I don't know. I might try and solder it, actually. I might try and solder and then put a little sheath around it, but I just need to be very careful with the heat. Yeah, I think I will. I think I'll just solder it. So what I'm going to do is push that up. I will solder here, sheath on, put the heat gun here so it's not affecting that, and bend it back into place, because I think a solder will work better, because this might just come off when it moves up and down. This might just come off, but these are the parts I'm more worried about. So what I might do is try and take this button off, do the wiring, and then stick it back on again. I think that's what I'm going to have to do. And that should, all going well, now be securely in place. So that's a little mould there. If anything, I could maybe try and get that a little bit closer. That's the heat gun. I'm just going to give it one more little blast with the heat gun. So I'm going to do this off screen because it'll be easier. That is now in place, so hopefully that is going to be enough if I bend that back down. We've now got that one in place. So the light has now got wires on both sides. Now for this, and this is going to be the tricky one. It's going to be very tricky. Because this needs wires running down as well. So I'm going to make the wires the same length, and then I can always cut it once I get to the other side, once I know how much space I've got to play with. So light's now in. I now solder the button into those bits as well. I'm hoping this will stay, because it seems to be strong enough, but we shall see. So that should be now, get in focus, that should be now in place, and the light is here. So this will then slot in to the inside of these. I'm printing out new ones of these. Because obviously, as I mentioned before, I had to move those little screws. So that will just slot in to the whole thing, push all the way up, and hopefully get into here, which I'll then glue. But I'm not going to do that until I know it's all working, but ultimately that's where it will go. So next thing now is to figure out where this will glue, which will solder, to the board. That's the next step. And here was me thinking I would get all this done in this video.
You know, Peter, I hate to say I told you so about not being a genius, but, yeah! In your face!
I was checking out, before I started soldering more things together, I was checking out the little MP3 players to get the file added onto it. And I'm glad I did, because no matter what I do with these, I plug them into a PC or a Mac or whatever, nothing launches to say format the flash drive, or it's not recognizable as a flash drive. Now, I've spoken to the company that I bought these from. It was through eBay, but 100% feedback and everything else, and he's been really good at getting back to me in terms of the comms. Says he's never seen an issue with these before. It's just a matter of plugging in. It'll ask you to format it. These are cloned versions. Apparently, if you get the proper version of these, it'll pop up asking you to install software to allow you to add in the files. However, these ones, it should just be a matter of formatting it and adding the files to it. However, I'm not getting any option to format them. So I've tried multiple cables, I've tried different ports, I've tried PC, laptop PC, I've tried my MacBook Pro. Nothing seems to be, it's just not recognizable as a drive. However, as I say, the proper version of these, this is a clone, but the proper version of these, there's not really a drive. You see, it's software it installs, or you can only use it on a PC, but it's software you install, and then it'll allow you to then upload a file or files to it at that point. So I'm going to try this on a different PC, a friend's PC if I can, see if they have any luck with it. If not, I'll send these back and see if I can get new ones. But I have ordered 2 of the real ones to see if those work. But for whatever reason, these are just not connecting and allowing me to add files. So because of that, I can't complete the video until I get new ones of these, make sure I can actually upload the audio files, and then I can complete the rest. We're actually fairly close. Once I get this soldered to this and soldered to the Bistable board, we'll be there. It's just getting to there. Currently, without this knowing this works, is the issue. So, see what happens with this, and in part 3, we'll figure out what I can do. We're so close.
Damn you, Holden!